we'll get started. I've set the timer for 10 minutes. Happy running. Now today I'm going to follow on from what we talked about yesterday with running technique. Running technique is a big topic. There's lots to talk about, and already yesterday I covered the fact that a lot of people think that running technique is going to be the main factor that influences performance and injury prevention. But as I talked about in the couple of episodes before about the idea of macro and micro loading, you've got to really get both right. There's not one or the other that makes or break you as a runner. It's going to be a combination of getting your programming right, getting your rest and recovery right in the macro loading, and then also getting your how you're actually doing running right. And that's going to come down to, again, with the micro loading, to shoe selection. We talked about tempo yesterday. We'll talk about shoes in a future episode. But today I thought I'd follow on from what I briefly touched on yesterday, which was basically different types of foot strike. And I'm sure this is something that would have, if you've followed running even the slightest amount, you would have come across the idea of heel striking, midfoot striking, or forefoot striking. So I just thought I'd talk about some of the pros, cons, risks and benefits of each. So the basic idea is that this foot strike is the moment of impact when your foot is touching the ground after your flight phase of running. So where running differs from walking is you've got both feet off the ground at one time, and then it's going to be about where your foot is coming into contact with the ground that dictates what your style of foot strike is. So the kind of classic talk about this is that, you know, ever since new sneakers came in with large padded heels, we've all become heel strikers. So the basic idea is that your foot is out in front of you, your heel touches the ground first, it's followed by a movement from your heel through your midfoot, and then coming off your big toe on your forefoot. And probably a couple of years ago, or maybe a decade now ago, when the Born to Run book, which I would really recommend if you feel like you're enjoying your running journey and you want to kind of go deeper into running culture. Born to Run is one of the classic books of the genre, which I remember reading when I'd just broken my toe when I was about 18. And it just made me so desperate to run, and it was really quite a cruel and stupid thing to do, to have done it while I'm have just broken my toe. But it's about a guy who basically follows a Mexican running tribe who are famous for barefoot running. And so that really kicked off a big movement into barefoot running, which I got totally swept up in, and got the 5-finger shoes and did my barefoot running, and very quickly had some big issues in my calves and forefoot. But it's really popularized that idea that heel striking in big cushioned shoes potentially could be problematic, and there may be better ways to do it. Now, since it's been out, that book's been out for a long time now, the discussion around it has basically become a bit more nuanced, where there's the realization that for some people heel striking is totally fine and appropriate. For other people, that forefoot barefoot style is okay, but for very like running without shoes is something you really need to build up very slowly too, because it's quite a large stress in the body. And then otherwise, midfoot striking is sort of seen as maybe what most people probably should be aiming for, but again, it's all very individualized. So going back to the idea of heel striking, basically the arguments against it is the idea that when you're reaching out in front of your body with your foot and landing with your foot in front of where your hips and your shoulders are, you're basically going to be contacting the ground at a diagonal out in front into the ground. And whenever you have contact with a surface, you have a ground reaction force. So the idea is you've got an equal and opposite force that then pushes back against that incoming force, which in this case, when you've got a heel foot strike out in front of you, means that you've got a straight leg, and then you've got this braking force. So it's basically like a decelerating force going straight up your straight leg, through your ankle, through your knees, into your hips, and then disperse through the rest of your body. So there was a lot of discussion to say that that was maybe problematic and maybe causing people with injuries and making dangerous thing. And there became like lots of proponents for forefoot and midfoot running to basically try and get that ground reaction force instead of being back through your body in your straight limbs, making it go kind of pushing either up or slightly forward to try and decrease those impact forces, which so many people talk about as being bad for your body. So I'll just briefly touch on the idea of this like impact being bad for your body. It might be even worth a full episode about. But basically, as I said in the first episode, and I'll keep coming back to this, your body adapts to what you spend your time doing. And impact is something that you can adapt to if it's within like reasonable ranges. And it's a really necessary part of healthy development, because for bone mineral density, which I'm sure most people would have heard about as basically the metric for having strong bones throughout your life, to maintain bone mineral density, one of the most important things, nutrition and hormonal things aside, is impact stimulus. So the biological law that governs bone growth is called Wolff's law, and that's comes down to basically like impact being the stimulus. Just like with lifting weights, you would you need to lift heavy things to get bigger and stronger muscles. We need impact forces to lay down new bone and basically maintain our bone mineral density. So impact forces aren't like, that's not to say it's a bad thing. Impact forces are essential. So coming back to the idea of this, like shifting from a heel strike to a midfoot or forefoot strike, the idea with the forefoot strike, I guess, is that your heels are barely touching the ground. You're mostly running off your toes. So, when you're sprinting, you're basically forced into this forefoot strike where you've got more of a forward lean in your body, and then the ground reaction force by the time you've hit the ground is almost as if it's like pushing you forward instead of pushing you backwards. So this is something that will kind of happen when most people get up to a certain pace. You won't be able to help but be a forefoot striker, and that's why you see like with those sprinting flats that people in the Olympics would wear, the shoes are very much related to being cushioned at the front, and there's basically no heel because your heel's not even going to touch the ground. So the last type of and so I guess basically that's something that will happen in sprinting. But if you just relied on that for most of your running, just sprinting and just running around during your STEPN sessions, that's a really quick way to make your calves very sore. And as I talked about before with barefoot running, that kind of almost makes you go forefoot. Like you can work up to being a bit more midfoot with barefoot, but you're basically running on your forefoot, and that very quickly will make your calves very sore and potentially lead to other injuries and like plantar fascia issues in your underneath your foot. Or basically it really overloads those structures, and if you haven't spent a lot of time building up to be able to handle that, then that's going to be an area where you exceed your threshold, as we talked about before, and that's generally what causes injury. So so forefoot, again, useful for sprinting, but there's a reason why if you do too much sprinting the next day, you'll barely be able to walk because your calves are so deconditioned. And when I get into the strength programming little exercises that I'll put up on the Facebook group, there will be some like predominantly calf and foot exercises, because that is the point of contact, which often is the first to run into challenges. But what we'll now talk about is midfoot, because I think that's where, not saying that you should be doing any one of these, but midfoot is where I've sort of landed as being what I'm aiming for. And the idea there is that you're basically landing with the foot directly below your hips, so not out in front, not sort of behind with that massive sprinting forward lean. And you're trying to basically land almost, like in the middle of your foot with your knees and your hips slightly bent, which is going to be basically being able to disperse the load and the impact through those spring-like joints. So you've got your ankles, knees, and hips all in that slight bend position now you've got this kind of, there's the alarm, the 10-minute alarm, so should be finishing up your run, but you've basically got like the muscles dispersing the force, as opposed to back when we were looking at the heel strike, where you've basically got the straight limb which can't do as much shock absorption, and the forefoot where it basically just comes down to your calf and foot. So midfoot's a really nice way of basically getting your ankles, knees, hips all to work together to disperse the load, and then also to be the thing that propels you in a more even way than just bouncing off your calves. And so this is where, when you're doing strength training, doing exercises like your squats, deadlifts, lunges, all of these big compound joint movements really conditions you to be able to handle that and optimize that midfoot strike and load. But again, running technique is a complex and individualized thing, so just hopefully this highlights just that there are different things that you can try and different things that you can see how it feels for you. But remember, whenever you're trying, if you want to try something new, always really gradually transition. Don't just go from being a heel striker to whipping your shoes off and just running barefoot. Otherwise, you will not be able to run the next day. So whenever you're trying something new, do very small amounts of it and transition very slowly if you want to change your style. All right, we'll finish up there today. Hopefully you got something out of that. And if you aren't already, jump on the STEPN Injury Prevention Facebook group, and consider sending some GST from your run my way, because basically I'm just trying a new style of business, doing this online Web3 crypto business way. So interested to see if that works out at all. And if not, I just enjoy talking about this stuff. So I'll see you tomorrow.